Welcome to episode 85 of Project Geekology. I am one half of your host, Anthony, and joining me as always is...
Pew, 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 Dakota from New York, yeah! Guys, we're covering Days of Future Past today, X-Men Days of Future Past, and Anthony, we're gonna send you right back to 1973. How do you feel about that?
Am I in the future or am I in the past?
Currently, you're in the future.
Okay.
Right now.
Okay, I thought I was somewhere in the middle ground or something.
And I think you're the only one capable of making the journey. Your body is just... It'll be able to withstand the impact better than anyone else's in the whole of the future. So you got to be sent back to a day of future past.
Oh my goodness, I'm going back to a time where I didn't even exist.
Guys, as you've probably gathered, we're talking about the follow-up to X-Men First Class and also the follow-up to the original trilogy of X-Men films, X-Men Days of Future Past, and it's gonna be a crazy discussion because it's such a crazy movie, just conceptually, and the fact that they actually pulled it off,
and that it was good.
Conceptually, it was strange. Conceptually, it was crazy that they pulled it off, and crazily, yeah, they made a great movie out of it. So we're going to be talking all about that and more later on in the discussion of our 85th episode. But Anthony, what have you been up to this past week?
Dude, I've been sleeping all week. I just woke up.
I feel like I've been doing the same. I know I haven't. I know I've been working a lot, but I haven't been doing like the work that I want to be doing, if that makes any sense. Like, do you ever feel like you're at your day job and you're just like, this is not what I want to be doing with my life? Not that making money is bad or having a career is bad or, looking to the future in that respect, but I often get this feeling when I'm working or grinding to just make ends meet. I feel like I could be doing something bigger with my time, like going back to 1973. I
totally get that. I feel like that's like, I think
it's just human nature, right?
Yeah. No, but I mean, you're right. And I think that, most, if not all of us are like capable of it, A lot of times it's just us getting in our way because different things, complacency and not pushing through certain barriers that get in our way. And which actually, speaking of that, I have been working on the website. It's coming over.
For those of you who don't remember, Anthony has been working on a website for the podcast, and he's well on his way to like figuring out how to basically create a website for us. So that's what he's talking about right now.
Yes. So right now, I've got the episodes set up pretty well. I've been using a little bit of JavaScript for our episode page so that our episode page isn't overloaded with every single episode that ever comes out and will come out. I have it limited to like 10 episodes per page. It's called pagination. I think I talked about it last episode, and it just limits like 10 episodes per page. So, there's a lot of stuff that I'm working on. I'm setting up a featured episode section on the front of the page along with our last 5 episodes. The thing that I'm trying to figure out, and I'm gonna find it out eventually, but what I'm trying to figure out is how to update the featured episodes without having to hard code it in every single time, because that's not efficient. Work smarter, not harder. So I have to be able to set it up in a way that I can post featured episodes without going back into the code, essentially. But it's been coming along well. I've showed you a couple of pictures.
Yeah, you've texted me a couple pictures of like what it looks like from your end, and so far so good. I'm excited to like peruse it when it's finally complete.
Right. I might actually post a couple of pictures that I've taken of the website on our Instagram and our Twitter. If you all are interested in checking those out or anything else that we post, they will be in the show notes. And so yeah, like I've been working on that. I told you a little bit before we actually started recording that Kingdom Hearts was ported over to Steam.
For those of you who don't know, Kingdom Hearts is my favorite game of all time.
And yeah, they did some visual upgrades to it. And right now there's actually a sale on it where all the games are on there. And you can get that first little collection that has the first and the second game along with Chain of Memories and all of that. The like final mix of the second game. And then Kingdom Hearts 3 with its DLC. And then there's this bundle called the Integrum Masterpiece. And it has everything all together. And you get a Steam exclusive Keyblade in Kingdom Hearts 3.
That's pretty sick. I'm not gonna lie. So you said that the visuals have been changed or upgraded?
Right. So they're
Just like an HD makeover?
right. They look pretty crisp. Like they look really good. It looks very nice. It runs like super smooth. I mean, it probably did on, the PlayStation versions probably ran pretty well, and I'm talking about like the PlayStation like collection, like the releases that they came out with
The
over
re-release,
the years.
yeah. I think they did a PS4 re-release.
Right. And
recently, in quotations, yeah.
And Kingdom Hearts has been on PC for some time now, but it was on the Epic Store, and a lot of people are not too much. I'm to be honest, like, I'm not a big fan of too many launchers. Like, I'm like, bro, like, I just want to have most of my games in one place. I mostly keep the Epic launcher because sometimes they'll give out free games and I'm like, okay, I mean, it's a free game. And so that, and if I decide to like hop on Fortnite, which is like a rare occurrence for me, but yeah, no, they brought it over to Steam. A lot of people are pretty stoked, and it's been getting some pretty good reviews, which is pretty good because there was a release of the 2 OG Battlefronts. They had like a collection, and it was like supposed to be kind of like some upgraded visuals and stuff, but it released pretty broken, and some of the servers were messed up, so that really got people upset. So the fact that this was ported over and they did some tweaks and it did pretty well.
My cat, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I was like, what is that? I thought that was a parrot at first. And
yeah, it might as well be a parrot. Loud. When I first got this guy, he was so quiet, dude. Like, he would try to meow and he'd just be like, because he was just like a malnourished little kitten. But now he's super loud and like in charge of the entire. This is his house. I just happen to live in it.
That's usually how it goes with cats,
Yeah, that's it. Sorry, I
No, you're good. So no, it's nice to see it ported over. It plays like very well on like the Steam Deck. It looks good on it. So the fact that we've got it on Steam, which is a beloved launcher, dude, Steam has been around for a while, a lot longer than like the Ubisoft and like, Epic, all these other like launchers and stuff. Steam has been around. Battle.net has been around for a while, but in its current state, I think it's in its current state, it's older. It's like newer than Steam. I think that like Battle.net was kind of game specific back in the day. Remember, like,
yeah,
like when like when you and I hopped on World of Warcraft, like there was no like main launcher that had all the games.
It was just World of Warcraft.
It was just World of Warcraft, or if you wanted to play Diablo, like Battle.net was like their servers. And that's how they were able to connect.
Battle.net wasn't a thing until after, I think, the 4th or 5th expansion. Like, that was well.
Well, I think Battle.net.
2010.
So I think Battle.net was a thing with Diablo 2, but not in the way that we're thinking about it. It was
okay.
Their I think that's what they called their servers. And then it became a launcher like way down the line, which actually I've been playing a little bit of WoW because Cataclysm Classic came out like a bit ago, I think like a month or so ago. So I had seen, or maybe even longer, like maybe at least like within like the past few months it came out. So I've been playing a little bit of that. Yeah, man, it's crazy. Like, I just want to know when this game is gonna stop being considered classic, because after a certain point it's like, dude, this is not classic. So
yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Speaking of Battle.net, do you remember there was a website called battleon.com, and there was a game, it was like a Java like RPG game, maybe not Java but like Flash RPG game called Adventure Quest.
Online. Dude, yeah.
I used to love that.
Dude, Adventure Quest was huge. Yeah, dude, like that was
the early 2000s.
Yeah, dude, like I feel like it was like the early version of what the internet is today. Like, the internet's old, but like back in the 90s and even like before that, it was just barren, nothing.
It was a wasteland.
It was a wasteland. Yeah, a lot of just
you would get your games wherever you could get them.
Basically. Right, man. It really was like, think about like when the United States was first colonized, and then when they started moving out west, it was like the frontier. That was the internet back then.
Yeah, so I'm looking it up. It's actually 2002 that Adventure Quest first started. And
I remember
yeah,
us playing it.
Like right around the time we were playing World of Warcraft, actually. Probably a little before that.
Yeah, a couple of years after that. World of Warcraft came out towards the end of 2004.
Yeah, that
and
makes sense.
yeah, dude, like, I mean, I'm pretty sure, like, we played it, like, when it...
I loved it.
Essentially, when it first came out, right?
Yeah.
I think, because I remember, I'll never forget the story, because you knew, and I think we've already told the story before, but I think you knew that I was into the RTS genre, real-time strategy, until you were like, oh, you know, there's this game called Warcraft 3. I hadn't really played Warcraft before that, but you had invited me over. You're like, oh, yeah, let's check it out. And I think that between the time that you had told me and the time that we actually got together to play, World of Warcraft had come out in that period of time. And so you suggested, like, hey, let's try out this new version. It's called World of Warcraft. And, like, we hopped on, and you're like, dude, this is nothing like the game that I played.
I don't think we've had this conversation on the podcast, but I do remember that.
Dude, you remember that? Like, dude.
And yeah, so I remember being, like, weirded out at first, but then obviously it was the most addictive game, I think, of all time. You know?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
There was nothing like World of Warcraft.
Dude, there was nothing. Yeah, like, we had gotten our first taste of, like, truly online gaming like that, like, back then, like, dude, in 2004. And, dude, I know that we had brought up the story. I don't know if we did on the podcast, but the fact that you and I were, like, what? Children, man. Like, we're like 13, 14 years old. No, maybe younger. And we're waking up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to play World of Warcraft, dude. Remember that? Dude, we would set like, an alarm just to wake up to play World of Warcraft.
Yes, it was really funny. And the two computers that we had were in different rooms. So, like, we would just be playing on opposite sides of my old house, basically.
That was so crazy. But it's always kind of been in my life, even if it's not all the time, I always get kind of like the itch to play it, and I'll hop back on it for a little while to play it. And I still have fun, man. It's something that's familiar. It's something that I've grown up with. I've known. There's some other MMOs that I've played that are pretty cool. Like Final Fantasy 14 is pretty cool, but I think it's a little bit harder for me to get into that one because I had friends to play with in the beginning of my time in World of Warcraft. So I was able to figure out how the game worked with friends. So it was easier, whereas now I'm kind of like wandering around like, okay, what do I do? Like, I feel like I'm wandering around aimlessly sometimes.
I also find that Final Fantasy 14 has a harder or more confusing learning curve. If like it took me a lot, same with Elder Scrolls Online.
Yes.
It took me a while to figure out what the heck am I supposed to be doing. And I think that never happened. That never happens when you start a World of Warcraft campaign. You get put into a small section of the map, you eventually get to a larger section, and you grow your character from there. But anyway,
right.
I think we're going on a very deep World of Warcraft tangent.
Dude,
right?
I mean,
just
dude,
like
I could easily do an episode on World of Warcraft, but Dakota, I think that we need to get you back on, man. I think at least on Classic, so that you can get that, like, oh my gosh, that nostalgia.
The issue with that is, like, I really miss my characters, and can you play your characters on Classic, or you'd have to create a new character?
No, yeah, you'd have to, like, all that other, like, characters and stuff are on, like, retail. Classic is, like, its own thing.
It's its own
right
thing, yeah.
But I mean, there is something fun about making a new character and kind of building them up, and
100%.
I've actually looked more into, like, and I know that, like you said, we're getting, like, crazy deep into it, but I've looked more into, like, building up specific stats and stuff for whatever I'm trying to build. But yeah, man, yeah. If you ever decide, man, hit me up. I will definitely hop on with you. But yeah, enough about me and just running my mouth off of the different video games that I've been playing. Persona 3. What have you been up to? I had to throw it in there.
Yeah, right. Speaking of which, is there ever going to be like a Persona 4, or, is 3 just like it right now?
Yeah, I think that they're talking about coming out with a remake for 4. I know that they're doing a remake for the earlier ones also.
You did mention that.
Yeah,
okay.
So.
All right.
And there's a Persona 6 being in the works too.
And there's a Kingdom Hearts 4 in the works too. So I'll just throw that out into the world.
Yeah, see?
Anyway, what have I been up to? So, like, I was trying to allude to this earlier in the episode, but I've been like very busy with work, so I haven't had a lot of time to like do my own thing. And every time I come home, I'm like super tired because it's a construction job. I'm lifting up heavy things, I'm pulling wire, blah blah blah. But I have been chipping away at the project that I've been talking about for literal months at this point. The Star Wars timeline, or Time Saber as I'm calling it. Patreon members can, like Patreon members for Geek Critique, they can go and find like a draft of it and it's like full size, but like you can go to my Twitter page right now and I've been giving like updates regularly on like what I'm like, where I'm at with that project, and you can get a nice glimpse of like what I'm talking about in terms of basically what I'm going to say next, because there's so many titles within the Star Wars universe, whether it be comics, novels, junior novels, young adult novels, TV shows, video games, movies, whatever. There's a lot. There's a lot of stuff that all comprises the canon of the galaxy far, far away. And I've had to like make some like choices as to like what I want on the timeline versus what I don't want on the timeline. I know that I want novels and stuff. I know that I want comics and TV shows, obviously, and movies and video games. But the issue that I've come across now is that something that I've like immediately taken off of the table when it comes to this is the short stories. There's a lot of short stories. There's a Star Wars Insider magazine that comes out every month, and almost every month they have like a new canon short story. It's a couple pages, random character in the galaxy. It takes place whenever the author wants it to. But anyway, there's a bunch of those. I've decided not to do that. So any like short story anthologies, anything like that, I've just decided to ignore for the sake of room on the visual timeline, basically, and it would just clutter it up. What I've realized is that there's the IDW comics, they're called Star Wars Adventures. There's probably 30 or 40 of these issues. They all take place at random areas on the timeline. I had started putting those in, but what I forgot to realize is that each of those issues is a half issue. Like there are two stories in each issue. So like it'll be like Star Wars Adventures issue 9. It'll go in say 10 BBY, but the second story takes place in 3 ABY. So I've just decided it's so confusing, I'm just going to remove all the short comics as well. Like I've already decided to exclude the short stories from my timeline. Now I'm deciding to exclude the short comics, basically. So any of like the free comic book day stuff, I've just decided, unless it's like pertinent to the story, I'm just removing it from the timeline. So yeah, that's kind of the big update that I have. I've gotten through to just past A New Hope, and I've like started chipping away at that section that I told you last week I was like really worried about, which was the amount of like comic books between those movies. So I'm navigating that as we speak. But yeah, so that's where I'm at. But removing the Star Wars Adventures comics from IDW cleared up a lot of space and it looks cleaner. So I'm happy about that.
We'll be back after a quick break.
What's up, cinephiles? I'm Nicholas Ibarra.
And I'm Bella of Stratus.
And we want to tell you about the Gimme 3 podcast, a series for cinephiles. A show in which we pick 3 films based on one theme.
That's right. 3 films, one theme, like Gimme 3 movie musicals.
Gimme 3 Michelle Pfeiffer films.
Gimme 3 Pixar films.
Gimme 3 reasons why you shouldn't listen to our show. That's not an episode, that's just a legitimate question.
The Gimme 3 podcast is not just about expanding your watch list, it's about saving you precious time when you're endlessly scrolling through your streaming apps. So take 3 seconds and subscribe to the Gimme 3 podcast, a series for cinephiles.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like a massive endeavor. And, honestly, like we're on the topic of Star Wars. I've watched the new episode of The Acolyte. Obviously we're going to make an episode of The Acolyte, but what are your thoughts so far? I mean, we got the first 2 episodes that start off strong. Now we're on the
3rd episode.
Yes.
It's called Destiny. Without getting too heavy into spoilers, because this isn't a Star Wars episode, you guys probably haven't seen it, or if, anyway, I would say that this episode was like a 7 or 8 for me. I liked a lot of the ideas that were in it. I just don't know how it all fits together yet. And I think that's on purpose. A lot of people have hated it. for, random reasons. A lot of it's, just people wanting to hate it.
Right, right.
But we're only getting half of the story with this flashback. Everything that we see is from the character May's point of view. There are no scenes in that whole episode that don't feature May, like the main character. I think that we're going to see another flashback that will focus on either Osha, the other sister, and what she's been up to, or the Jedi themselves, because I don't think the Jedi are totally innocent in the massacre of the witches in that scene. There was just too much convenience there. So
right.
Those are my thoughts. There's a lot of talk about how this could potentially invalidate the character of Anakin Skywalker, and I'm not going to get into why that is, but I do think it's too soon to tell exactly what the process is for how the twins were created and what that means for the wider story, because obviously Lucasfilm thought about this. It's not something that they just pulled out of a hat, So that's my thoughts. I like where it's going. I like most of the direction. Like in previous shows like Obi-Wan and Boba Fett and Ahsoka to some degree, my biggest issues were direction based. If those stories were told in a novel, like Obi-Wan Kenobi would have been a great novel. But because the direction was so poor, in my opinion, I was able to poke holes left and right, because I was able to see, why can't the character just walk around that barrier? Why doesn't Vader just walk around that fire? Why is Leia suddenly running away from these people who are twice their size and she's very slow? There's a bunch of stuff that I could believe if I didn't actually see the visuals of what's being presented on screen. But because it's being presented on screen with obvious ways around objects, it was crazy to me. I thought I was going crazy with Obi-Wan Kenobi. You don't really have that with this show. So it's a totally different type of directing style, and direction wise. What are your thoughts? I'm sorry, I keep talking.
No, you're good, man. No, yeah, I agree. I think that while it's a flashback episode, so, I'm not trying to dig deep too much into it, but it was necessary for the information that has been presented to us so far. So I think that there was a lot that was good in it. I do agree that there's two sides to every story, so hopefully we get that in the next one, the other side.
I don't know that the next episode is necessarily going to be another flashback, but what I will say is notice that the first two episodes of the show, the first episode was called Lost/Found, and the second episode was called Justice/Revenge. I think that was the name of the title. But what that tells me is that there are two sides of this story that are going on. Mm-hmm. But this one episode was only called Destiny, which means that it's only focusing on one side of the story. There's no fate might be the other one, Destiny/Fate or whatever. There's none of that. So I do think that we're going to get another flashback episode, but I don't think it's the next episode based on just comments that people have made.
Yeah, man. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add, or shall we hop into...
I just think that, it's interesting that we're talking about going back in time with this flashback when we're really looking forward to talking about the future. No, let's jump into X-Men Days of Future Past.
Dude, I was just I knew that something was, it's we're looking forward to the days of future past,
Yeah, when we're recording, I think Anthony and I both kind of realize, our shows generally are around an hour long. And so when our recording gets to about 30 minutes or between 25 and 30 minutes, that's when we know to start pivoting into whatever topic is at hand for the day. And I could tell Anthony was looking at the time. It was just do you have anything else to say, Dakota?
Well, I knew that. I mean, obviously, when we're done editing, when we get to this point, it's not going to be 30 minutes.
It'll probably be 25 or something.
Right.
Like that,
or even early, maybe even 20. But yeah, let's hop into the topic of discussion, man. We move into another good movie. We enjoyed the Wolverine, as you called it.
The Wolverine. I don't know if you caught that. I inserted a clip from the first movie into like when I was explaining why I kept calling it the Wolverine. So if you listen back at our last episode, you'll get some explanation as to why I call it the Wolverine like that. But anyway, this movie starts so strong.
Yeah.
It's a wasteland, like it's a New York wasteland basically. There's like prison camps in Central Park. Sentinels are rounding up humans and mutants alike. And then you have this basically like rogue X-Men who are, you know, they're trying to make a difference, but they keep getting caught up in like Sentinel action, and Kitty Pryde uses her powers to send people's consciousness back a couple hours, a couple days, so that they have a little bit more time to plan for their next steps, basically. And I think that's such a fantastic concept, and it's a great way to introduce the conflict of the movie and like what's at stake. But what about that like first fight scene where you know we had a whole bunch of like new mutants and like old mutants doing their thing. We got Iceman really, you know, sliding around. We got Blink making portals. Dude, there was some cool stuff in here.
Right, yeah. I thought it was cool. A lot of the combos that they were using. Blink was like really good for setting up like different combos for like everybody, man. This is like later on, but like there's a part where she puts a portal that sends Colossus into the air, and then he's like falling down, and then she puts on another portal and he shoots out to the side and hits a Sentinel. That was super sick. Like there was like a lot of like really cool
just dynamic
dynamic
like
and cohesiveness between the mutants and their powers. And
I love the portal that she puts in front of Bishop, where he can like get a closer range of like action with the Sentinels that are coming towards wherever the X-Men are. Dude, it's just such a cool movie. The action in this, especially the future scenes, is phenomenal.
Right, yeah. The thing that I really like about this film, and even though it's a lot different than a movie like Spider-Man No Way Home, there was a certain aspect of it that reminded me of Spider-Man, because you have the old X-Men from like, you know, when they started the movies back in the 2000s, and then like the new iteration that like I know that a lot of them are technically supposed to be prequels, but there are moments where there feels like there's a clear separation there, and it feels really cool because it's like you have Hugh Jackman's Wolverine that's blending both, even though he was in X-Men First Class, but
yeah,
we know him for those earlier X-Men films.
You compared it to No Way Home, which is a good comparison because you have like a multiverse of characters coming in from different generations of our movie-going history in one film, which is a really cool concept. But what this reminded me of was Star Trek Generations, which is the film where the original series Star Trek cast meet up with the Star Trek Next Generation cast. And Patrick Stewart's also in that, so that's also why I'm, you know, thinking about that in this moment. But it had a lot of similarities in that respect. It's almost like a passing of the torch from the original cast to the new cast, and I love that. Because we were talking when we were covering the First Class, like some of these characters, some of these actors really nailed the role. Some of them I'm still not feeling. But when superimposed over their older or like the original cast, the newer cast really shines. Like I had an issue with Michael Fassbender in the first movie just because he didn't feel like Ian McKellen's version of the character. I don't think his take on Magneto changed all that much, but the juxtaposition of the scenes with Ian McKellen and Fassbender were just phenomenal. Like it was just such a cool back and forth. And by the way, for those of you listening that haven't seen this in a while, there's a version of this movie that you can check out called the Rogue Cut. ROGUE. It adds like, what was it, like 19-20 minutes of
right. I think it's like an additional like maybe 17 to 20 minutes
of footage that wasn't in the theatrical version of the film. I haven't seen the theatrical version of the film in years, almost a decade, probably about a decade at this point. So I do not remember what scenes were new specifically because this is the first time I'm seeing the Rogue Cut. But there were scenes that I was just like, I don't really remember this. And
Right.
Those are the scenes.
Right. So there's a scene where Magneto and Iceman go and save Rogue.
Yes.
That's a new scene.
So that wasn't in the original film.
Right. There was like all that added stuff. I also don't remember Rogue being in the end like that.
I don't remember her being in the movie at all, actually.
I think it was very minor, but like...
What I do remember is her being present in the X Mansion after after they fixed the future. I remember her and Bobby in that scene, but I don't recall any of the other scenes. So I'm assuming that most of Rogue was cut for the sake of brevity.
Right. And I think that they had this whole cut because there was a little bit of an issue where like Rogue kind of goes from being a focal point character to like a little bit of a toss away character as those movies come out. And then you have her in this original film, and yeah, her moment was very brief, so they added a lot more of Rogue. And I do like the utilization of her power that Kitty Pryde was sending Logan to the past, but she had gotten injured because Logan's having some like PTSD moments or like moments in the past that are causing him to kind of lash out. And he cuts Kitty, and it's hard for her to focus because she's injured. And the fact that Rogue was able to kind of like finish it up because, she can copy powers.
Why don't they ever restrain his hands, man? Like, whenever Wolverine is asleep, it's just every single movie, he wakes up with his claws like raised.
Like he's ready to kill someone.
Every single time. Yeah, it's gonna happen.
I mean, like we have the very first film where he just like completely just like impales Rogue, and her power is save her, but like, dude, yeah, you're right.
Every single movie, he either like wounds the person he's sleeping next to, hurts the person who is like helping him, like on a sick bed,
or is just about
to take the life of someone, like fists like totally like in their face.
Yeah, we have a moment like that in the Wolverine.
Yeah, you got a big moment like that.
But yeah, I think that there's also some moments between Mystique and Beast that were added. I forgot which moments those were because I had kind of looked it up. I do believe that Jennifer Lawrence's performance as Mystique in this one was a lot better than in the first class. It was believable. Like, she was a believable Mystique. She felt a lot more like the Mystique that we had gotten in those earlier films. Kind of very cold, very like cutthroat, and kind of like, kind of built her up to be this type of person.
Who she turns into be. Yeah.
And she's kind of off the leash now.
And really quick, while we're talking about Mystique specifically, do you feel that they made her too blue in this one? Like, was she like really dark? Like in comparison to every other Mystique that we've had, it's always been very like, very deep blue, but now it's like almost edging into purple. Like it was very dark. I don't know. I every time she was on screen, I was just like, they made her too dark. I don't understand what's going on. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about the plot, because Mystique is integral to the entire story.
Yeah.
We have a future where Trask Industries Sentinels have gone haywire and it's almost like a Terminator-esque future.
Right. Yeah.
It's man versus machine. And it's gotten to the point where like
their directive has like evolved.
Their directive, yeah, it's not even just them targeting mutants. It's anyone who has a latent mutant X gene that could potentially, generations down the line create a mutant. So
essentially
it's
everyone,
almost
like really,
yeah. Because I don't think anyone is devoid of that gene, basically. So what makes them so unique and scary is the fact that they developed a way to adjust to any type of fighting style. It was akin to, what's that guy's name? Darwin from First Class. Like everything that was thrown at him, he was able to adapt. So basically, like, we find out that because Mystique kills Bolivar Trask and she's then targeted and they use her genetic DNA to create these future Sentinels. That's the future that we end up with, basically. But I almost feel like had they used the DNA of that guy Darwin from the first movie, the abilities that the Sentinels were using was a lot closer to that of Darwin's than it was of Mystique's. And I almost feel like that was the original intent.
Right, but, your boy's dead.
He got crispified.
He got crispified. Yeah, the Sentinels in this movie are a lot different than what you get from the Sentinels in the cartoons. And even, in some of the video games, you get these giant, weird purple looking robots in the cartoons. I mean, they're dangerous to mutants in the cartoons and stuff, but these ones are very similar to the Terminator 2 Terminator that was that kind of liquid, like the liquid one.
Yeah.
So that they were able, exactly like you said, adapt to a fighting style. There's that moment where Bobby's fighting one of the Sentinels, and the Sentinel he's like frozen, but then uses this fire ability to melt the ice, And
did we ever see them get stopped? Like, was anyone able to effectively kill any of these Sentinels, or were they just able to slow them down? Because I don't remember if there was any moment in the future where they actually killed a Sentinel.
I think that they were able to kind of just slow them down enough to pretty much a lot of the moments where they would go back in time to warn their past selves so that they could move. It was pretty much just that. I think that some of them died each time that they would do that, but it's so interesting. I don't think that Mystique killing Trask might have, I guess it would have been a little bit of a catalyst, but even if she didn't kill Trask, they would have captured her, because she would have been in a moment where she was surrounded, and whether or not Trask was dead, they would have used her, so I think whether he died or not, the results would have been the same.
Yeah. What I liked, I keep saying what I liked, but there was a lot that I liked in this movie. So let's talk about actually sending Logan back, because nobody else was capable of making a trip like that. Kitty was worried that they wouldn't be able to survive the trip, basically, to go back all the way to 1973, which is this catalyst moment in time. Even though, you had Eric and you had Charles, who were alive back then and could have potentially done it, their bodies wouldn't have been able to take the strain, but Wolverine could. And I think that was the way to inject basically the main character of the original trilogy and 2 other films into the new series of X-Men films in a realistic and natural way, and it worked super
right well. I'm actually glad that you talked about that, because I was thinking, it was so interesting the way that they went about time travel in this. It was very similar to the Assassin's Creed games, where it was like the Animus. And I was thinking, you know what? I feel like time travel in that kind of way is a lot more realistic than actually sending your whole physical being back in time. I could imagine, it's still crazy science fiction, but it sounds so much more feasible that you could send your mind back to an older self. I don't know how that would work, but still, it sounds more... They
sent a consciousness back.
Right. It's a whole consciousness thing. You're not sending this whole physical matter back in time. So, it made me think, that's a lot more realistic than the way that we think about time travel, Doctor Who and the TARDIS.
But what was cool about it was that Logan was still anchored in the future.
Yes.
He had to be
like the Animus in Assassin's Creed. The body is there, but the mind is in the past.
Yeah, a whole 50 years earlier. It was such a cool way to do that. Yeah, I was really impressed by how they were able to manage all of that, and conceptually, it was so cool, dude. I'm amazed at this movie, actually. The fact that something this cohesive came out of the Fox brand of Marvel movies is incredible to me. I'm so happy that this movie exists. It might be my favorite of all of them. I don't know that it's the best movie of them, but it's my favorite of the ones that we've seen so far.
Well, Fox they did come out with some really, really good films. And that's true. You can say, that's a lot to be said, considering the fact that Sony with their Marvel stuff, dude, like it's like they really just don't know what's going on over there, man.
Currently.
Yeah,
well, that's
yeah.
the thing. Like, here's what I'm trying to say. After this point in the X-Men franchise, although I haven't seen a lot of it because I just chose to bow out of these movies for a little bit, besides the Deadpool franchise, they've progressively gotten worse. You know, the Fox X-Men movies after Days of Future Past. If you look at the Rotten Tomatoes scores, if you look at the reviews, it's just a downhill trend from here. So I actually haven't seen X-Men Apocalypse, which was teased in the post-credits of this film. I haven't seen X-Men Dark Phoenix, and I haven't seen New Mutants. So I'm excited when we finally get to those to cover it. But yeah, that's why I find this such an amazing film, because it's the peak, for me, it is the peak of the X-Men storytelling up to this point, because it captures everything that worked so well with the original trilogy and cast and injects it into something that has a new breath of life, you know? Yeah, I love this movie. What did you think about Charles Xavier choosing to remove his powers for the sake of maintaining his legs?
That's interesting. You know, we're so used to the current iteration or the older version of Charles Xavier that you would think he would never do something like that, especially if he knows that he could use his abilities to help people, right? But, you know, grief can really send some of the smartest people into a downward spiral and cause them to make decisions that make no sense. And, you know, there's a lot that happened. You know, this is after First Class. You know, he loses Mystique, you know, Raven. He loses Magneto. He loses pretty much everybody except for Hank. And he loses his legs. So he's like, well, I've lost everything. Let me at least get something back, you know? So I can imagine that it is believable that somebody would decide to, you know, I guess he saw that the trade-off was worth it for him.
Yeah, and he almost became, well, he did. He kind of became a junkie. He became reliant on this drug that allowed him the ability to walk, and he was just kind of fading away, you know, in his mansion. He kind of became like the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, you know, like he just didn't think that there was any reason to move forward past where he was, basically. So I kind of liked that story, and I liked the scene specifically where he hasn't taken the drug in a while, and he's, you know, just as they're entering the house, and he kind of like topples over, and he instinctively, you know, asks Hank to get him a dose. In this case, a double dose, because it's been a while. Or no, Hank decides to give him a double dose. But it's, you know, it's not like a malicious thing that he's taking. We don't know. We don't think it is. But
Hank's also taking it too.
Hank is also taking it just to, you know, look human, I guess.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the professor in this particular instance, it's very clear. It's almost like he has an opioid addiction, you know, like it looks like he's about to inject himself with heroin or something like that.
Right. And there's a couple of things that are happening here for him. It's, you know, he's getting his legs back, but also his mind is quieted, you know, like he's so used to, I mean, obviously over the years he's gotten better at controlling it, but I think that he got
lack of using his powers
right
made that worse.
Yeah. And so I think that like what he really enjoyed was also not having to hear the thoughts of others.
Yeah, what I really liked about Wolverine in this movie was that he was able to reach Charles Xavier in a way we didn't really expect him to be able to. He was able to really talk heart to heart, man to man with him, and he didn't like force Charles to do anything. He was just like, especially like with the drug, like, you sure you want to do that? We could really use your help, you know, like, and that instead of like telling him no, don't do that, he decided to forego his legs a little bit longer just so that he was able to, you know, help Wolverine. And eventually there's that scene after he's incapable of using Cerebro.
Yeah.
Where Wolverine basically says, all right, go into my mind. And, you know, after he goes and sees all of Wolverine's past trauma, which, by the way, I think they showed every movie except X-Men Origins Wolverine. I didn't, unless I'm missing something, I didn't see any scenes of X-Men Origins Wolverine, but I think there was every other movie.
I thought that was such a cool moment too, because he tells Charles to like reach further than that, and the fact that like this past Charles can actually like see like, this future through the mind of Wolverine. It was so crazy. Like, this man is time traveling to the future through Wolverine's mind and talking to himself.
Yeah,
that was so cool. Yeah, I love that.
It's like astral projection, but Charles in the future was able to detect the presence of someone in Logan's mind, that being himself, and what he was projecting into the future. Super cool. Just fantastic scenes, fantastic imagery. Just that shot of a younger Charles Xavier and an older Charles Xavier like looking into each other's eyes and trying to communicate the damage that is about to happen if Mystique goes on with her plans and everything. Just fantastic movie all around. We're reaching the 1 hour mark, but I want to talk about Magneto's plan a little bit, because that's where in my rewatch I was just like, oh yeah, that's kind of dumb. Magneto, he has a lot of style. He goes out with a bang every single time. If it's not lifting up the entire Golden Gate Bridge, it's outdoing that entirely by picking up an entire baseball field and covering the surrounding area around the White House with it.
That was so wild, dude. That was so crazy.
How do you even come up with that plan? Like, we
need more of that in the MCU, man.
You think? You think we need more of that?
Dude, like, I mean, stop trying to make comic book movies, like, realistic. Dude, none of this is real. It's gonna,
okay. All right. Yeah, all right.
Like, some people, so it's so hard, because, like, we know we're going to watch a comic book movie, and I'm guilty of this, too. And we see something utterly ridiculous, and you're like, dude, that would never happen. None of this would ever happen. Like, ever. These aliens coming out of a portal and a bunch of superheroes fighting them? That's not happening. Like, this man that's got a glove that snaps and, like, half the universe is gone? That's never happening. True. So,
yeah,
no,
right,
but I do agree with you. Like, dude, there's some crazy moments happening. Like, why would you lift up a baseball, like, of all things, to, like, pick up a baseball field, or, like, the stadium?
But also, like, Magneto, this is a premeditated thing that Magneto's doing. So the day before the whole Washington DC scene, he like goes at night to the train that's like loading all of the Sentinels towards DC, and he's capable of using the train tracks to embed the Sentinels with metal. Basically, he knows that they don't have any metal in them, so he basically creates a metal skeleton for them so that he can eventually control them when the time is right. My issue there is, like, why not just destroy them on the spot? If, like, he has the ability to wrap metal around these things, or, once he does all that, he can just destroy them on the spot, and, like, Bolivar Trask's entire program is, kaput.
I think he wanted to do that in front of people. I agree. Because, remember he had that whole moment with the cameras.
Yes, he wanted a scene. He wanted to make that moment.
Right. Which, honestly, to tell you the truth, is very, very much like Ian McKellen Magneto. Magneto wants to make a grand display. Hence, the whole plot of the first movie. He wanted to do this whole thing, turning all these people at like a UN party from the Statue of Liberty. I mean, we're talking about the original, but
yes,
it's so crazy.
You're not wrong. Like, he does have a penchant for just big bombastic showcases of his power, and he even does that in X-Men 97. Probably like I would actually say a much bigger example in the latter half of the new X-Men 97 show.
I will say,
which I can't talk about.
I will say that the newer cast does get in touch a little bit better with the mannerisms and how the older cast is. James McAvoy is definitely a lot more of a believable Professor X than in First Class. So is Michael Fassbender as Magneto. Like you said, there are those differences. I'll just suspend disbelief and be like, okay, it's their younger self. But it's kind of tracking a little bit, you know. Definitely Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique was definitely a lot better. Like, it felt so much more like from the original trilogy. So I remember watching through this and I'm like, dude, this is just so good. By the time you get to the point to where they send Wolverine back, you're like, this movie is amazing. You know, and it's still like earlier on in the film. But yeah, man.
Let's talk a little bit about when Wolverine is brought back to the future. I think that was such a powerful moment for him, you know, like being brought back to a time not only where Sentinels weren't a threat, but a future where all of his friends were living happy lives.
Right. And yeah, there's literally like a very small group of people that, well, actually mostly just Professor X that knows that there was such a big change that happened. Because Professor X, remember, we just talked about how he went into the mind of Wolverine to see that future. He saw what the future was going to be, and the fact that he's living in that different future, it's crazy. Like, only them two know the difference. So, I mean, could you imagine living in an alternate life like that, knowing that you just dodged a huge bullet?
Yeah, wow. It's super cool. And it kind of just opens the door to more storytelling, which is perfect for comic books.
It is. I love, you know, that's like a multiverse moment right there, you know?
Yes. Yeah, but it's also a happy ending for the original cast, because that's the last time all of those cast members are on screen pretty much in the same scene, whether they're in like the same shot or not.
Right.
But,
oh yeah, you get your boy back as Beast.
Yes. Kelsey Grammer's back as Beast.
Yeah.
We have a moment where we see Kitty Pryde and Colossus in the same room, which, you know, they have been a couple in the comics before. And, you know, we have Rogue and Bobby back together in this future, which that was an interesting take, because like in X-Men 3, The Last Stand, it kind of was hinted at that Bobby was like starting to fall for Kitty Pryde. And in this film, Days of Future Past, we see that come to fruition, where they clearly have a relationship together. But we, as the audience, are just like, oh, but what happened to him and Rogue? Because, you know, we want them to have the happy ending. But they end up getting that happy ending. So it's cool.
And then we get Cyclops and Jean Grey back.
Dude, what a perfect way to end that. Yeah. And I love that, like, Cyclops still has the same relationship. Like, easy there, pal. with Wolverine.
Yeah.
But Wolverine was happy to see him.
Yeah. Oh, dude. Yeah, absolutely. He's like, oh my God, like, you know, they're here. But I loved that interaction between him and Professor X, where he's like, oh, you're like late for history class. And he's like, I'm going to need you to give me the update on the history. And he's like, oh, welcome back. That was so
fantastic.
Yeah.
Really, really well done.
That was so cool. Because, yeah, like up until that point, Wolverine was just him, you know? So,
yeah,
I really enjoyed that. It was good. From start to finish, it was a solid film. And it was a really, like you said, a really good, like, baton passing, you know? We'll see what the
next
other films,
up,
you know?
Wade Wilson.
Yes.
Deadpool. Finally, we get to the...
we get the second Deadpool movie.
Yeah, buddy. I'm excited to jump back into this. I haven't seen most of these movies in a while, so this is fun. This is such a bizarre like trip that we've decided to go down as a podcast. We've just become an X-Men podcast at this point.
Right. Bing. This is Future Anthony. So something that Dakota brought up to my attention is the fact that we went through this whole podcast without mentioning Quicksilver once, which is absolutely insane. So I will add this little anecdote to the episode. But Quicksilver was amazing in this film. Super, super cool. He was played by Evan Peters, and I mean, he's played in a few things. You've probably seen him. He's been in a couple things on Netflix. He was in the movie Kick-Ass. But yes, Evan Peters as Quicksilver was absolutely amazing. He had a really, really crazy moment in there where they're trying to leave the Pentagon, after saving Magneto, and he slows down time and he saves them. And he does this because he's moving so fast. He's really, really fast. They're about to get shot by these guards, and he saves everybody in the group. He saves, Wolverine, Professor X, Magneto, which, I mean, we all know that Wolverine would have survived that, but still, he slows down time, and he's listening to a song while he's going through all of this. It's an absolutely insane moment. Just another one of the many reasons to go back to see this movie if you haven't seen it in a while, or just go and see it if you haven't. And like we said, there is that rogue cut, so it does add a little bit more to the film. And so I'm going to send us right back to the past. Well, I mean, we do have stuff in the pipeline. We are, I don't know if we talked about it before or after we finished recording an episode, but Dakota and I are in the works of recording a Death Note podcast after all of this. So yeah, I started watching that, by the way.
This podcast won't end when we get to Deadpool 3, so don't worry. But yeah, I have to start rewatching Death Note. That used to be one of my favorite animes back in the day. But guys, thank you so much for listening to us here for our 85th episode. Next week, we're covering Deadpool, and we're very excited about it because it's been a long time coming with these X-Men movies.
We finally made it to a Deadpool movie.
A true Deadpool movie, yeah. If you'd like to check out any of our socials, be sure to click into the show notes down below, and you'll find links to our Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, all that jazz. Be sure to follow us there for more updates on when podcasts are going to be coming out. And be sure to leave us a fat 5-star rating on whatever podcast application you are currently listening to. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
The Wolverine.